Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending our session this afternoon. Uh, we have a number of topics to cover as it relates to engagement outside of the classroom. If you are here, you understand that learning happens outside of the classroom walls, and we're going to discover and talk about a host of ways that students are learning and are becoming involved in student engagement activities across our community college populations. Today, we have a host of topics to discuss, and hopefully we'll get through our agenda. I'll give sort of a broad overview of how we view student life here at the system office. I have my colleague here, Ms. Loftin-Bell. She'll give you a specific zoomed in campus view, and we'll banter back and forth in regards to how other campuses in our system are handling some of these questions as it relates to involvement with our dual enrollment populations. Before we begin, I'd like to turn the floor over to Ms. Loftin-Bell to introduce herself, and then we'll move forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kismet Loftin-Bell. I am currently the coordinator for student leadership and honor programs in the Office of Student Life and Engagement at Forsyth Tech Community College in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I also have experience of being an adjunct professor in political science and also serving as the advisor for Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society. I'm excited to be here. Just know that this is an interactive, so if you have any comments or questions, make sure you mention it in the chat.
Thank you. So for those who do not know me, my name is JJ Evans. I serve as the Associate Director of Student Life here at the Community College System Office, where we represent all 58 institutions in our system. Prior to my role here at the System Office, I served as a Director of Campus Life at Alamance Community College, a campus of about 5,000 students in the Piedmont region of North Carolina. But before we jump into our presentation, I always like to get feedback from those in the room. So we created 2 Mentimeter polls, and we have sort of our overarching question here for you, and then I'll bring up the poll and how you can respond. So the 2 prompts are: what aspects of student life are available on your campus for dual enrollment students? And then what is their level of involvement? We'll handle these 2 prompts here in a moment separately. So the first prompt, if you want to engage virtually, pull out your tablet or phone or open up a secondary tab, go to menti.com and use the code 38447961, and you'll see our first prompt. It is a word cloud prompt, and so feel free to use short words or phrases in regards to the level of involvement that students may have locally at your campus. And here I'll switch over to it so we can see some responses. So let's see as those chime in. Who wants to respond first? Limited. Only guest speakers. Some festivals, some athletics. Awesome. They can engage in all things. Wow, that's awesome. All clubs, all organizations, tutoring. Perfect. International education, wonderful topic. Intramural sports. Your local gym. Student government, they can hold offices. Food pantry. Interesting. This is very interesting. Anyone else want to chime in? We have about 53 participants in the room, but only 13 responses, so I'll give it a few more seconds. Most events, okay.
So I guess the Lyceum is a seminar series, maybe.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
Clubs and organizations.
Yeah. The Wellness Center. Great addition. Thank you for adding that one. Perfect. While those last few responses are coming in, we'd like to sort of go to our second prompt here. And this one is multiple choice, so you can choose multiple things as well. And this prompt is, describe the level of engagement for dual enrollment students at your campus. And so I'll read the choices in case you can't read them on your smaller device. They have their own clubs and organizations in their early high school, middle school. They cannot participate in college clubs or organizations. They can join college clubs or organizations. They can serve in SGA. They're allowed to participate in PTK, PBL, and other leadership societies. They are allowed to serve in leadership capacities in these organizations. They are allowed to join, but they cannot serve in leadership capacities, or you may not know. Interesting. Mm. So we'll give this prompt just a few more moments and we'll break it down and discuss all of it. This is great.
Yeah, it's interesting to see sort of a couple things that stand out, right?
For sure. All right. So we're going to hop back into the presentation. Definitely thank you for presenting. Feel free to continue entering your responses. We will come back to them as it relates to slides in our overall presentation. But here, let me jump back. Awesome. So here at the system office, student life really encompasses these four large bucket areas. So all of our athletic programs, our NJCAA athletic programs, there are 20 institutions in our system that participate in those. And then many of our campuses have intercollegiate or intramural sports locally in which dual enrollment, on some campus, dual enrollment students can participate and some not. I think it will depend on the different institution. Obviously, a main part of what we do is campus event programming. So all of our co-curricular learning opportunities or partnerships with faculty and staff to create programs, bring speakers, all the food and fun and festivals, all those types of things. And then any of our leadership and governance programs. So primarily, you'll see student leadership and student government programs in our system. And then many of our campuses are engaged in a national tie-in to a national organization for service learning, but many have local service learning opportunities for students on their campus as well. And so that's sort of just a general overview of the 50,000 foot view. We're going to zoom down into Forsyth Tech, and I'll allow Ms. Loftin-Bell to describe these different things locally at her institution.
Sure, thank you. So at Forsyth Tech, we have some aspect of every area that is presented here, and short version of the answers that were to the questions that were asked before is that we allow our dually enrolled students to participate in every area. There is no distinction, and actually at various points in time, they are our primary group that participates, and we try to work with particularly our earlier and middle colleges to schedule our events around their schedule to make sure that we have maximum impact and to allow them to be able to participate with the least amount of hindrances, right? We have several honor societies, including Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society, which I mentioned I'm an advisor for, and we also have Skills USA. And so Skills USA covers a wide range within our engineering and CTE programs, allowing for students to display their skills. And even my son mentioned when he was in dual enrollment that he had an opportunity to participate in Skills USA for welding. We have a number of health tech honor societies for nursing, for radiography. They range. So it's probably about 4 or 5 different health tech honor societies that we have, and we're in the process of trying to establish a technical honor society at a different one of our offsite centers. And so we want to make sure that we engage the students. And matter of fact, for PTK, when I became the advisor at the time, the requirements for PTK was 18 credit hours, 18 to 48 credit hours, and it had to be applied to an associate's degree. Well, that means that for the most part, a lot of our dually enrolled students will not qualify because they're not able to complete an associate's degree. Some of them that are in the early college do. Many of them that are in early college do, but sometimes our middle college students and our dually enrolled, the ones that remain at their base school, are not able to complete a full associate's degree, and it was leaving them out. And so it was a very unique situation where we had two students who were in health tech programs, and they did not qualify, but they, because of the credit hours, despite having a 3.7 and a 4.0 GPA. And so their cohort colleagues petitioned and said, hey, we would love to be able to have our colleagues be a part of PTK. What do we need to do? And so that team voted to change our bylaws, local bylaws, to allow for basically 12 credit hours, drop it down to 12 credit hours, and not have a cap on it. We also modified to make sure that we can pick up certificate and diploma as well. So that opened up the gamut for Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society, and our minimum GPA is 3.5. And so this was a great expanse, and I think it really allowed for our students to be able to engage in an honor society that opens up many doors for them, and particularly for our dually enrolled students. Also, they participate in Student Government Association. Matter of fact, our current vice president is a middle college student. And so we're excited to have him and several others. And this year, I think we've gotten an influx of early and middle college students to request to join SGA and be a part of it. Not only do they have their own within early college, and I believe they also have something similar in the middle college, but they also get to participate in the Forsyth Tech's primary traditional curriculum student government association. So that is great. We're excited to have them join us because that's a different perspective that we're allowed to have represented at the table. Then we have student ambassadors, and these are students who are basically the face of our community college. They represent us at student events, outreach events, any events with donors. And so it is great to be able to have them participate. And oftentimes they tend to be traditional curriculum-based students. However, we wanted to make sure, and actually my supervisor wanted to make sure that we had representation from dually enrolled students. So oftentimes we were able to recruit. We have, I'm trying to think, I think we have at least one student that is currently a student ambassador that is dually enrolled, but we have had a couple in the past that were able to be in that position. They are able to participate in any clubs or organizations that we have on campus. There's no limitation. We encourage them to join, but they also have their own within early and middle colleges. And then any opportunities that we provide, whether it be activities, lectures, spring fling, fall festival, I'm trying to think, movie night, or when we're giving out sort of gifts and incentives to our students. So for instance, there's a trampoline park. We just gave out tickets for that, or we sell movie tickets. They are able to engage and participate and access all those things at Forsyth Tech.
Thank you so much for that feedback.
My pleasure.
So now we're going to get further into the interactive component of our presentation today, where we really want this to be a dialogue between the audience and the presenters. And so we're going to have a few prompts here. We're going to break down each of these categories and really have some hopefully frank and honest discussions regarding the levels of participations, both at your particular campus and then, of course, here in the system. So first, let's talk about honor societies. So most of these honor societies are headquartered by some sort of national office. So there's going to be some national versus local conversation in regards to sort of rules, regulations, et cetera, as it relates to students. And so we have a few prompts. The prompts are going to change just slightly, but each of these prompts are going to be for each of the key areas. So if you want to include your responses in the chat, you can. And of course, we'll talk about these overarching. So I just pulled a few just to have some background context here. So the National Technical Honor Society says student membership is open to high school and technical school and college students who are enrolled in a career and technical education program and must meet local qualifications set by the local institution. So obviously there's going to be some determination whether locally if you're going to establish a chapter, and it's going to be for dual enrollment students as well. Of course, as Ms. Loftin-Bell mentioned, PTK is probably one of the largest organizations in the two-year space. They say any dual enrollment student with high school and or college student is eligible for membership if they meet the local membership criteria set by the local chapter. Again, there's some local determination there in which colleges, have sort of control whether to open the gateway for those students to participate or not. Same thing with Phi Beta Lambda, the National Society of Leadership Success, the North Carolina Scholars for Global Distinction, which is a certificate program in which students can receive a global distinction honor if they complete or certain coursework, as well as out of the class experiences for students as well. And so all of these are open to our dual enrollment populations, but in talking and sending out a survey in a number of our institutions, we know that engagement varies and differs by campus. And so I'll wait for some responses in the chat to see if anybody wants to indicate whether those students in honor societies can participate locally. One thing we always like to talk about is if they can participate, can they serve in executive roles, right? So can a dual enrollment student serve as your SGA president at your college? Many institutions in our system say yes. There are a few institutions in our system that say no. And I think it's worth the conversation to figure out if there is apprehension, to figure out maybe why, and then try to bring both of those camps closer together to having the same experience for all of your types of students. And so I'll sort of pass that question. You mentioned you had a vice president on your board. Will you, in your SGA, so we'll hold on to that. Do you have anyone in a leadership capacity within an honor society or?
So yeah, so we have had, and I don't think I have anyone in the leadership team this go round, but in a previous leadership team, we definitely had a number of students who were in early and middle college. And so that was great to have that experience. As a matter of fact, one of the, she was the VP of service. She actually received a scholarship from the region of PTK, Carolinas region, because of her service. And so even as an early college student, so that gave her a bump up, and she walks in with some scholarship money because of her leadership role and because of the service that she gave back to the community. And so we definitely have students who, if they want to step up and serve in leadership, we are able to allow them to do so without any limitation. I'll be really interested in the audience to find out. Do they have honor societies where they do allow for dually enrolled students to participate? And if so, in what capacity, as you asked before? So I think everyone's quiet.
Well, we'll jump to our next topic then. We'll talk about student government. So here in North Carolina, student government, or having a student trustee on the local college board, as well as our state board of community college, is legislatively mandated. There have been ongoing discussions each year whenever we gather for our conference regarding dual enrollment students and their early and middle college students and their participation on our boards. travel to events, as well as having those students serve in the highest capacity of student service at their college. And again, it was met with a mixed reaction. There are some colleges that will allow a early college and middle college student to serve as an SGA president or vice president, et cetera, someone within the executive role. There are certain colleges that only allow their dual enrollment students to serve as like club representatives or senators, so sort of that one tier below the executive tier, et cetera. And they have their own local reasons why. There has all, of course, with COVID and our participation decreasing, there has been questions and conversations regarding, well, how do you find students to serve in the executive role? Or when, you know, in the pre-COVID experience, they were traditionally nominated. We'd have elections and student votes, but if you have students that are running unopposed, or has the college created a different process of maybe interviewing students, or, you know, selecting students, putting them through some type of interview or review process in order to have those students elected? And so, again, across the board, there's really not one answer for North Carolina. We like to say there's 58 different ways for things here in our system. And again, we found through our conversations that many colleges are all over the place as it relates to trying to create a seamless experience for these students.
Yeah, so if I may back up just a moment, it ties back into the recruitment phase. So for recruitment for Phi Theta Kappa, I have like opened up the spigot and tried every single possible way to recruit students. So through that mechanism, through the headquarters, once we upload the list of students who qualify, we have a choice of just having headquarters send out an email or send out a letter to students. And oftentimes, and maybe some of you all on this, you know, Zoom have had this experience where students are like, is this real? We got this email, we don't know if it's real, is it a scam? They're asking for money. And so what I often do is I follow up with an email from within the college, so that they know that some of this information, the information that they're receiving is real, that we do exist, and that there are people who are operating, sometimes feel like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, but we are approachable. In addition to that, what I started doing was also every student, when I request the information of every student that has a 3.5 GPA, after every term, I also ask for their advisors. And so I send out information to their advisors as well and say, hey, here are a list of students who qualify for PTK, and please encourage them to join and participate, ask questions, learn more. And by doing that, now they have multiple touch points, you know. So I've heard multiple times that 7 is the magic number of touch points before folks are willing to act. And so now at that point, they get at least 3 or 4 touch points of encouraging them to join. With that said, once I have a network, I now have a huge network of students, and I'm excited and thankful that we do have a large number of students who have decided to join PTK. So in addition to sending out this information about student government to the general body, we also do targeted solicitation, and language matters, right? So one of the things that I did this year, because we knew that, recruitment was difficult with folks returning, folks concerned about having to show up on campus, I made sure that in the headline of the email, it said leadership pays, right? And so we provide, I'm jumping on a little bit ahead, but we do provide some sort of compensation for our students who serve and meet the basic requirements or the minimum requirements for serving in student government. The list, I have about a 780 student list for PTK. So that list went out to, that email went out to them as well. So now they're getting it on our main like intranet system. They're getting emails. They're getting emails coming from PTK side. So now again, the more times we reach out and touch them in different points, the more response that we're able to get. This year we did have it where, like I mentioned, our vice president is a middle college student, and there was no competition between the two, the president and vice president, but we still turned it out and released a voting platform for students to vote. And so that, again, to get them engaged in the process. And we have gotten a lot of students to come and ask to participate. So I see, I'm not sure, is it Joanne, said that we do allow CCP and or early college students to be the president of the SGA, but I do question this. Can a high school student truly represent the entire student body when the average age of our student is 23? And I think that's a great question. And one of the things that we do at Forsyth Tech is we have that conversation. They do not represent solely or operate only by themselves. They have a team of students. So they could very well be working with someone who may be 23 or 25 or 34, as well as being 16, 17, 18 years old. So we encourage them and we reiterate to our students that you represent the entire campus of 7,000 to 8,000 students. And what does that look like? And so because they interact with students from every level and every age group, they begin to understand.
Yeah, I'll definitely like to chime in on that response as well. Serving as a director of campus life, I had SGA presidents from, we'll say, 18 to 40 plus, and across multiple years. And I think any student can represent the voice of the student body, knowing that we are doing our best to bring in representation and voices from all facets and all corners of the college. When we talk about dual enrollment students, I know this is sort of more focused to our early college, middle college, and our traditional dual enrollment students as well, but we have other dual enrollment students and categories in terms of our college and career readiness, our ESL, our GED, our adult high school student populations as well. And I think even having a broader definition of dual enrollment would bring in other facets and other corners of our colleges and our institutions as well. And so as long as we are keeping our ears to the ground and talking to as many students as we can regarding their experience while they're in our doors, that yes, any student, regardless of age, obviously they have to have some level of maturity to sit on the state board. And we do that through training and coaching and, providing some professional development to make sure that they feel just as comfortable sitting at that seat as someone who's been a trustee for a number of years. And we do that for our state board of community colleges as well. And in terms about compensation and funding, this is always a hot topic, especially in North Carolina. There are some colleges that pay their student governments full tuition scholarships, right? But if you are an early or middle college student, your tuition is waived. So how do you compensate that student, right? That's always been some questions that we're sort of slowly dealing with more and more of, how do you pay a student then for their time, energy, and effort that they're devoting to their work in student government? And so, Ms. Loftin-Bell, I'm curious as to what that answer is for you. If anybody wants to chime in the chat regarding how you pay or compensate your student government officers, please do so.
So yes, this is a two-part answer, and it touches up on how they held accountable. So our students are required to maintain for SGA at 2.5 GPA and meet so many hours of service. And our hours of service include the trainings, their meetings, office hours, and the events and activities that they host and perform. And so once they meet that criteria, at one point we were offering stipends, but then we've had to have a little bit of a change, and that shifted to basically a payment. We're looking at modifying that to a scholarship because we realized that some of our students, having them be on payroll causes a number of challenges. For some, it may push them into a different tax bracket. For others, they may not qualify, particularly our international students may not qualify to work through this program, or they may not have all of the information like social security numbers or certain types of identification needed to be a traditional W-2 employee. And so we're looking at alternative ways, maybe a scholarship, and it's graduated based on the role that they're in. So representatives get paid a certain amount. It's higher for those who are on the board, and then it's slightly higher for those who serve as president.
Any other comments or questions regarding SGA? I see a lot of our SGA advisors sort of lurking in the background. Anyone want to share their experiences or what they do locally? If not, we'll jump ahead to our next category. All right, seeing none, here we go. So student ambassadors in our system here in North Carolina, 42 institutions have student, I guess, officially recognized student ambassador groups, you know, blah, blah, blah. At their institution. These students are mostly tied to either the campus foundation for or campus enrollment office for recruiting events, foundation events, etc. Again, these students come from a variety of backgrounds, both on the curriculum as well as continuing ed and CCR side of the house. Again, I'm interested on how you found students, how are they compensated, and then how are they trained to represent your college in your institution?
Sure. So a recruitment, very similar to the previous recruitment process before. We posted on the intranet. We target specific email lists, and then and I'm not sure how many years we've done it, but I know that this past year we specifically reached out to our data service department and requested every student that met the minimum qualifications for GPA and number of hours. And so we sent it out to that list as well. And that did help us to recruit. I know this past year we had 50 applications to come in. And so for 15 slots. So that was for me, that was a pretty significant number. Not the highest we've had in the past, but given the fact that, we're operating within certain parameters due to COVID, I thought that was a really good number. And we go through they have to complete an application. We now are moving towards a universal application for our student leaders, because oftentimes the questions are the same. We also are doing that so that if there's another opportunity, say for, like I mentioned, we had 50 applicants for 15 slots, but that doesn't mean that they can't serve in another leadership capacity and receive compensation for their service. So that gives us the opportunity to partner with other departments across the campus who have student leaders. So peer advisors interviewed for that. And so we were able to pull from that pool of students to also be considered for peer advisors, which actually is a paid position. It allows for our international students to be able to work on campus because it is a campus-based employment. Also, we have a number of other scholarship or scholars type programming, and this allows, having that universal application allows us to pull without having several different applications for students if they're interested in more than one program.
One of the questions that has come up again relates to payment and compensation.
Sure.
And so I'll ask it a different way. If a student, well, can a student receive payments by serving in multiple leadership capacity or multiple leadership positions at your college? So can they serve as the SGA vice president and a student ambassador and as a club representative and be compensated by all of those three different entities as a dual enrollment student?
So we've been moving and have moved away from that. And part of it is because one, we want to make sure every student has an opportunity to serve. And while we have students who are very dynamic and uh, talented enough to carry all of these, we want to make sure every student who is interested has an opportunity to serve in some sort of capacity. So no, one thing that we did this year is that, for instance, we have a service honor society, Alpha Mu Beta, and typically we would not allow them to serve in other capacities because there was some level of compensation. And so what we offered this year is and they can remain in the honor society, but they could not serve in a leadership capacity. So for instance, we have members who are part of the honor society and are student ambassadors, or part of the honor society and part of STA, but they cannot be in a leadership position that will be compensated for both. However, Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society allows for there to be, for them to serve in a leadership capacity in more than one organization, but they are not financially compensated through PTK.
And I'm jumping ahead because I know we're going to talk about this later, but is that written in your club or organization's handbook? How is that documented for students to be aware of that rule, we'll say?
Yeah, so we did end up updating our handbook to make that reflection, but it had already been, for the most part, been a part of it, and it was very interesting because when we made that adjustment for Alpha Mu Beta, a lot of students kept asking us because that was a new process, but because we had already had it outlined that they could not serve as a student ambassador and as in A&B, we had it as period, or SGA. But then we made that slight modification. So we had to update our documents to reflect it. And we have a student handbook that does all that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Our last group of students, or our last topic, is all of our clubs and organizations. There are institutions in our system with over 70 to 80 active organizations, depending on the academic year. And then, of course, some of our smaller institutions have fewer opportunities for students, but engagement is still happening. And here at the system office, we like to think that each student in our system should be engaged in at least one opportunity outside of the academic space where we're tying them into some co-curricular learning opportunity or some engagement activity in which students are learning more about themselves, the institution, the greater world itself, etc. And so I think you touched on this fairly well in terms of clubs and organizations. And going back to our chat here really quickly, it looked like of the folks who responded to the survey, the majority of our participants out there say that dual enrollment students can participate in clubs and organizations. That's awesome. There, of course, there have been some organizations that are potential exclusionary, or campuses that restrict participation for whatever reason. Maybe it's safety, maybe it's topic, maybe it's restricted to only those who are in a specific academic program, but it's nice to see that dual enrollment students can participate. I'm also curious if folks in the chat are providing opportunities for those dual enrollment populations that are enrolling in your classes that are online, or homeschool populations. So not necessarily, the earlier middle college, but also, some of those students that may be lurking for opportunities but aren't on your campus on a day-to-day basis. And so if you have a great example of that as someone, please throw that back in the chat.
Well, I will mention a couple of things that we're doing. Since COVID, we have made sure that all of our activities, as many of the ones as we can, are hybrid. So this allows for students who may be at a different location or offsite or staying home are able to continue to participate in the activities that we have. So if we have a meeting or a workshop or lecture series, we try our best to make sure that there is a live and a online version that's happening. And so this is something that we're going to continue to do. Which is also reflected in many of our classes, where we're moving to our classes having at least one face-to-face class and then an online component. So we're seeing that. The furthest I've seen anyone show up, I've had a student from Raleigh. We have our SGA located. We have a subgroup of our SGA at Stokes County, so they operate like an SGA team on their campus, in addition to the one that we have on our main campus. And so we also would like to have and are recruiting for representatives for our offsite centers, and they are spread out across the county. So we are encouraging our students to participate, and if they can't make it to campus, that they join us online for our meetings. The other thing that we have started doing is that we have an ongoing chat through Microsoft Teams. So it allows our students to continue to be engaged on a regular basis. My director engages, every day. Sometimes she goes on and does a short video saying, hey, this is what's happening. Just checking in, see how are you all doing. And we continue to have a conversation. They're able to make decisions on that chat or plan them for our meetings. And we're able to share information without a limitation of time and space.
That's awesome. Definitely, it has been adjustment for student life this past 2 years, and hopefully activity and energy and engagement has returned to many of our campuses and many of your campuses across the U.S. As more and more students are returning to our doors, and we're creating again a sense of student life and energy. And I think I like to hope to think that administrators and those working on campus now understand and have a greater appreciation for student life, campus engagement, having to have experienced virtual instruction for the past year and a half. We're going to jump ahead in our presentation as we wind down time, but we have 3 topics that we must cover. And the first is relationship building and talking to key stakeholders, both locally, whether it's in your earlier middle college on your campus, or talking to school administrators in the local LEA. It's having conversations, putting information in writing, establishing MOUs regarding the levels of participation. So in our system, there isn't in the 30 to 40 page instruction or bylaws regarding CCP from our state office. You will not find one word in there about campus engagement, student activity fees, as it's a local decision, a local determination, sort of like the one standard sentence. And so it's incumbent upon folks who are working, the local stakeholders, to engage in those conversations to really establish and determine what is the best avenue on a case-by-case or a campus-by-campus basis. So making sure that you're bringing these stakeholders to the room, having conversations, finding out who, there are some campuses where the student dual enrollment populations do not pay a student activity fee, but yet they still can participate. There are some campuses that require dual enrollment students to pay a student activity fee in order to participate and receive an ID. And of course, those processes are going to differ between institutions in our system, but it's imperative that we are bringing folks together around the table to have the conversation. And again, of course, document it in writing, put it in a place where folks can easily understand and comprehend how they can engage and sort of what is their limitation, if there is one. And so if any of you have examples, feel free to share them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll jump on to another topic, which is near and dear to both of our hearts.
So I will mention one thing on that last slide, that our we have a liaison between our early college and middle college and our main curriculum students. And so she did mention that we have been engaging with their principals and counselors, faculty and staff, but the way that they engage in their parents, they put out a regular newsletter to give them updates on what's happening on campus, what's coming up. And then also she's included on that advisor list when I send out for PTK. So in addition to that, she also gets other information that we send out. Specifically, our particular one also serves as an advisor for one of our Service Honor Society. So, you know, it's an opportunity by having some overlap in service to allow for that communication to cross over into our dual enrollment population.
Thank you. Next up is probably one of the most difficult determinations we've have to make, especially now with COVID, or travel restrictions that may be in place, and that's how do you travel with dual enrollment students? And so, as someone who's planned and programmed state conferences and collaboration with a number of advisors I see here on the line, there's some difficult conversations regarding how do you travel with minors? Do you require someone from the LEA, early college or middle college to accompany with you if you're going to sort of a local or regional conference? Do you require one of the counselors or instructors to hop on a charter bus with everyone else? Do you allow these students to drive to events and things on their own? So we're all going to meet at XYZ conference location, and if you just happen to live nearby, it's okay. You're sort of, what process are you putting in place in order for getting students to different events that may not be on your campus? And so student conduct has come up in previous conferences where obviously I think it's blurred between who responds directly to a student conduct incident if they're traveling on behalf of the college. Is it the early middle college principal? Is it the dean of students, the college? Sort of, if you're offsite versus if you're at a out of state, sort of what's the protocol? And so sort of thinking through and having policies and practices in place. And I think we often found that there are different populations of students that potentially fall through the cracks on how institutions respond in their code of conduct and things of that nature. And so being able to have conversations and working collaboratively with your local early or middle college to determine what will be the best policy for the institution is one of our recommendations. Do you want to address any of these and how Forsyth Tech may handle any of these issues?
Sure, I'll work backwards. So we do have it written into our code of conduct that anything happens during travel still follows under the code of conduct process. And we do have an officer that is specific to addressing that issues and a panel that reviews any incidents that are reported for that. But we have, since I've been on the team, I haven't seen any. And, we try to reiterate with our students on the expectations. Every student who travels pre-COVID, we have them to complete a form to release and agree to behavior responsibilities and photographs and all that. We have a photo release, liability release as well. When we did assignments, we typically paired up, but now we're looking at single rooms because of COVID. We are allowed to travel right now. It hasn't changed yet, and hopefully we'll be able to stick with it. And oftentimes, depending on who's on the team, if we have other dually enrolled students who have been working together, we pair them together, or we try to pair students, and this is outside of dual enrollment, but we sometimes pair students who can be with one to mentor the other. So that works out really well when we travel. Oftentimes we don't require that they contribute financially, but for some like, except for clubs and PTK, sometimes we may ask for them to contribute, but SGA, student ambassadors, any of those. And if they're going to drive on their own, we also have a release. We need to see their driver's license, their insurance, and have a documentation and all that before we leave.
anyone has any examples again of what they do, feel free to share. And in lieu of time, we'll jump to our next topic, which is money, 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 money. And money drives a number of institutional decisions. And again, through our conversations with other advisors around the state, we found that there are 58 different ways that this is being handled in our system. So there are some colleges that are charging these student activity fees. There are some that are not. Some institutions are requiring students to come bring $15 or cash or check or credit to the business office in order to receive a card that they take that then gets them a student ID or a student activity card in order to participate and engage. There's some institutions where, dual enrollment populations are paying a prorated amount because the LEA is contributing a small percentage, et cetera. And so it's all over the place in terms of trying to find what's going to be the consensus answer. And I think that our greatest recommendation is, regardless of where your institution stands in regards to charging or not charging and the levels of participation, make sure you spell it out or explain it in an MOU and make that public facing, or make it or share it in a way that can be shared with, early college and middle college teachers, instructors, counselors, in order to share and disseminate information to their student bodies and population, should you wish them to be engaged with students on your campus. And so, Ms. Loftin-Bell, again, feel free to jump in on any of these, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so it was a little bit of a mixed bag at one point, but now there is a source outside of our school, outside of Forsyth Tech, that provides and covers the costs for our dually enrolled students, especially those who are part of the local school system. At one point, there was a cost for anyone who was homeschooled or in private school. They would have to pay for their own student fees out of pocket. And I know this a little bit differently. Forsyth Tech, we had to pay. Surrey, I didn't have to pay. And I say that because my son was a dual enrollment student. And so at the same time, he went to both schools, and one place didn't require the payment. But we are working on trying to minimize that impact and to ensure that our students are able to participate.
Anyone else out there cover all the fees and charges for their dual enrollment populations? Feel free to throw or respond in the chat. Otherwise, we'll jump to our sort of last slides, our recommendations for future action. So I guess it's easiest, first and foremost, we recommend that you bring campus stakeholders together and talk about what engagement looks like on your campus. I know as many colleges in North Carolina are sort of transitioning to a one college model and sort of slowly phasing that in. There are some tough conversations regarding what should campus engagement look like across all of these populations, especially for our CCR and continuing ed populations, which in many of our colleges haven't received the same types of service that we do for our traditional curriculum students. And so, bring those campus stakeholders together to talk about what should engagement look like across all your student populations. You want to try to create some type of synergy, some type of buy-in, some type of policy where for the most part we can all agree that this is what it should look like. This is how engagement should happen. Obviously, probably one of the greatest issues in our system has been student IDs and who gets a student ID because of the cost of student IDs and turnover of students. And again, if you view a student ID as a central part to being identifying as a college student, then anyone that engages or enrolls in your door for instruction should be able to receive one. That's JJ's opinion. But trying to figure out what locally that decision is for you is best. Other considerations we came up with are making sure you're putting all these practices and bylaws, constitutions, rules, regulations, student handbook, making sure that, it's out there, it's in the public space so that students can find it if there are questions or, folks need additional clarity. And then, of course, always trying to include student life and engagement and sort of participation into the college's strategic plan, not only for enrollment purposes, but for retention, persistence, completion, and trying to create avenues and ties where we are attracting students as early as their first course, and we're going to find avenues to engage them across their learning and their time here at the institution so that they leave with some type of degree or credential from us. And then Ms. Loftin-Bell, if any final wise words to the group as well.
Sure, I'll just mention that what I have witnessed is that when we engage our students, even in clubs or any of the activities on campus, particularly our dual enroll, we often see them return as well for the traditional programming. And so I just encourage everyone to find ways to engage them. And oftentimes our dually enrolled students are ones that may have the flexibility of time and space. So that's something to consider as well.
I know we're right on time for our next session, but if there are any questions, feel free to throw those in the chat. You have our contact information. Please reach out if you want to continue this conversation. And thank you for your time, energy, and effort. And lastly, thank you for everything that you do for our students.
So I see Mary said this is very helpful information. We have new student activities coordinator at CCC.